One day I decided to buy some liquor, and then the gal, the cashier chick, she goes, "Hey, can I see your ID?" I'm like, "Sure." So I pull out my driver's license. I gave it to her. And she goes, "Oh, Alaska. We don't see very many of those here." I'm like, "Yeah, I bet you don't." And she goes, "It must be pretty warm down there." I'll have your listeners pause. I'm going to pause for a second to give your listeners a minute to think about what could you possibly have meant by down there. Okay, so I kind of looked at her funny and I go, "Down there? What do you mean?" And she goes, "Down there, by Hawaii." And I go, "Where? Hold on. How do you?" And I'm trying to the gears in my head are turning, trying to figure out what the hell she was talking about. And finally, it turns out that what she meant was, okay, when you watch the weather forecast and you see the lower 48 states, right, taking up the majority of the screen, then you see Alaska down by Hawaii, down there. I
Oh
said, "Oh,
no.
oh, oh, honey, no, no. Alaska is way up north. We're right between Canada and Russia. We get negative 40, during most winter times." And she kind of looked at me funny. She kind of cocks her head to the side and she goes, "Are you sure?"
Welcome to the Where Have You Been podcast. I'm your host, Bill Ream, and each week on the pod, I have conversations with incredible guests from all walks of life. Expect to hear funny, crazy, emotional, life-changing, and even sometimes life-threatening stories and experiences that will entertain and inspire you. As always, I appreciate your likes, subscriptions, ratings, and reviews wherever you are listening. It doesn't sound like much, but it truly helps the pod get to the ears of more people who may enjoy it. And check out the website, whybpodcast.com, for links to the socials where you can find pictures from the guests and their stories, and also buy merch if you're so inclined. Now let's get to this week's episode. Thank you for being here. And guess what, ladies and gentlemen? Once again, we have another fantastic guest on the Where Have You Been podcast. Would I say anything different if it wasn't a fantastic guest?
You say that to all the guests.
Well, but you're special.
You say that to all the guests too.
That I don't say.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. We have Andy. And Andy, tell people about yourself. Who are you?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Bill, for having me. My name is Andy Dietrich. I'll give you the paragraph version of who I am and where I ended up and how I got here. I am a German-born native, lived there till I was about 14 years old. Then at that age, my mom and I packed our stuff and we moved to Alaska. There's a little story behind that as well, if you want to hear it. I did my formative years in Fairbanks. We experienced negative 40, usually every winter. There are some interesting stories to come from that as well, if you want to hear those. And then at 19, I joined up, did the U.S. military service for about 4 years down in Southern California. And once I got out of that, I moved to Las Vegas and I've been here ever since.
And so how long have you been there?
20 years now, 21 years.
Yeah. Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah, I told myself I would move here maybe for a year, maybe two, see where it takes me. And Vegas has this really weird way of kind of pulling you in the most positive way. I don't mean that in a negative way whatsoever, but Vegas has a way to, once you're here, we're a bit of an island, right? If you see Vegas on a map, we're kind of stuck in the middle of nowhere, right? So once you're here, it's I don't know, just kind of you make it your own, you make it home, and either you love it or you hate it. And I've loved it for the most part.
That's great, man. That's great. So what are you doing out there?
I'm a professional fluffer, pillow fluffer. Okay, I always have to add the word pillow to a pillow because people give me these weird looks when I say that. So, when you go to the Cosmo and you get the room and the pillow is perfectly fluffed, well, that's me, right? We come in. No, I'm kidding. I do IT work. I've been doing IT work my entire professional career. I think I'm fairly good at it, or I can fake it really, really well. I love computers ever since I've had my hands on a Commodore 64. Kind of dates myself a little bit.
Yeah.
Right. So those are the good old days, right? The blue on blue screen. And I've excelled in my field and I've moved my way up the ranks and still do very technical things for a rental. Well, I work for a place called American Homes. So it's a rental experience company, right? We don't want to plug the company too much, right? But we rent out, I think it's 30,000 plus single family homes across most of the United States. We're a big landlord. We take care of our customers, our guests, right? We make sure that their experience is a positive one. So, but enough about them.
Yeah. And you've got a little side hustle going.
I do. I wrote a book about two years ago. It's called Play Stupid Games, Win Stupid Prizes, where I chronicle my personal mishaps. I talk about some personal growth, some misgivings, some unsavory moments, and then I also have some more serious thoughts that I ended with. So it's a little bit of everything that I've pumped into it.
Very nice. And where can people find you? I like to push that up front.
Yeah,
Socials or your website or
absolutely. I
anything.
appreciate the plug. So, real easy, right? You can either Google my name or Google the title on Amazon. If that's too much, you can just simply go to andysbook.com. One word, andysbook.com. There's a picture of me holding it up. There's a button to the Amazon link. You can do the clickety there, and off you go. There's a print version. There's a digital version as well. So.
I hope it's not too much.
No. So, and to give you full disclosure, right? So I charge, was it 11.99? So $12 for it, and my cut is like $4.80. So I'm not going to get rich off of it anytime soon. But however, if you ask real nicely, I'm more than happy to send you either just a PDF, right? If you just want to read it on your iPad, or if you ask really nicely, I'm happy to send you a copy with a signature in there as well.
Very nice. Yes, please. I'll take one.
Absolutely, very cool.
So travel for you started whether you liked it or not as a young boy, right? But you did you enjoy travel when you were young?
Yeah, I will say that my first traveling experience. So my parents divorced when I was too young to remember. My brother and my dad stayed in Berlin. My mother and I moved to the Black Forest, which is a beautiful region down in the southwest area of Germany, kind of bordering up against France. But we would, either I would fly up to Berlin or my brother would fly down to where I'm at. So I started traveling at a very young age. I mean, I was maybe, I don't know, 7, 8 years old, and my parents would just put me on a plane by myself. And I don't know, things were different back then, I think, to where it wasn't a big deal. Also, it was Germany, so I think the cultural aspect of it was a little bit different. It just wasn't a big deal. And I flew by myself when I was young, and it never bothered me. So even to this day, planes don't bother me, right? I just I fall asleep when the plane takes off, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I like to, but no one else likes it when I fall asleep on a plane, so I try not to as much as possible. So I know that this episode may be just a teeny bit shorter than most. So in the interest of time,
We can
I
always
would
do
like to
part
just
two later.
we can do part two later. Absolutely. Maybe, well, we'll see. We'll definitely do a part two. But yeah, so let's just jump right in. And
Yeah,
some guests will list every place they've been. You don't have to. You can do whatever you'd like. You can just talk
yeah,
about general areas. You mentioned some places already.
yeah.
So, Andy, where have you been?
Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, my teenage years for the most part were spent in Berlin. I was in a very sleepy little village, like I said, in the Black Forest. The place is called Unterreichenbach. We had maybe, I looked it up the other day. We have maybe, I don't know, 4,000 people that live there. We had, one elementary school, two bus stops. We didn't have a movie theater. We had like maybe two grocery stores, one bank. I mean, very, very small town living. Everyone knew everyone. It was great. Me and the other kids my age, we just were kids. We were jumping around and doing silly things in the forest and climbing up on little, I don't know, looking back, we did all the things that nowadays people would tell you, don't do that because you'll get hurt, right? Or I mean, I've
Right.
got my fair share of cuts and bruises. We've fallen off of rocks and trees and stuff like that, and I've gotten a couple of tick bites, right, over the years. But it was all good fun, right? We just enjoyed being in nature. I remember riding my bike almost every summer day to the nearest town. They had a public swimming pool there, and my mom would just give me a couple of bucks and say, "Off you go," and then she would have me out of the house for most of the day while I would go play with my friends. So it was a good time. Um, and then moving on to Fairbanks, Alaska, that was quite a I wouldn't say a shock, right? But there definitely are a lot of differences, not just from the cultural aspect, but I mean, look, the language difference, right? The people,
Did you
you
know
know,
any English before you went to Alaska?
yeah. So Germany, I assume most of Europe, I know at least in Germany, we are forced to learn English, or at least English out of a book, right? The proper British English, once we hit fifth grade. So I had a couple of years of at least educational English skill set, right? However, that is quite a bit different from conversational English, right? Additionally, I went from the proper British English to the Americanized, slang English. There was a couple of, times when I didn't quite know what what was being discussed, right? There was a lot of slang, a lot of idioms, a lot of sayings. For example, the phrase "and then some." And then some what? You're missing a word after that, right? What are you doing? And then some what, right? And then other little sayings like knock on wood. Why would you knock on wood? What does that do for you, right? So just little things. There
Yeah.
was
We
one.
still don't know. We still don't.
we don't
Still
know
don't
why
know.
we knock on the wood. I'm sure there's a reason, right? If you ask, uh, I almost said if you ask Jeeves. No, if you go on Snopes or whatever, right? Kind of dates me too.
Really dating yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, one cute little story that comes from that, however, is I was working at a little coffee shop in the Bentley Mall in Fairbanks, Alaska, and I was maybe 16 years old. And the boss called up and she goes, "Do we need anything? Are we short on anything?" I said, "Yeah, we're actually out of jalapenos." And there was a bit of a pause, and she goes, "We're out of what?" And I said, "Jalapenos." And she goes, "What, Andy? What the hell are you talking about?" I'm like, the little spicy things that we cut up and put into the. Oh, she goes, "Jalapenos." And I go, "Hold on a minute.
What?
How do you? Why would you pronounce a J sound like an H sound? Of course, no one tells you that that's
Right.
a
Shouldn't it
Spanish
be spelled
word,
like
right?
Halap?
Right. That made a lot more sense. No, it's jalapenos, right? So, of course, then I corrected how I pronounce fajita. I'll leave it to your imagination how I
Yep.
pronounce
Hmm.
that. Okay.
Yeah.
Back to Fairbanks, however, it was quite a cultural differences, and but I was 14 years old. You learn quick, right? And you adapt very quickly. But some of the things that you just don't understand, I think, if you've never lived in that kind of climate before, -40 does a lot of different things, right? So for example, of course, you have to bundle up, right? You have to dress, properly and appropriately, right? You will freeze to death. I've never, obviously, I've never experienced that. I never gotten really, really cold where I was afraid of my life, thank God. But whenever you watch movies of people being out in the Alaskan wilderness, or there is an action scene where someone, dives into a frozen river and they swim away from the bad guys, no, like you have maybe a few minutes before your body will just give up and you lock up and you freeze to death, right? So those movies are definitely a little bit more embellished than they really are.
Hmm.
Cold water, I like freezing cold water will kill you very quickly. But on a more lighter note, so one thing that people don't realize about those kind of, dealing with that kind of weather is that you have heaters in your car. You have engine block heaters, you have oil pan heaters, because at -40, a lot of liquids freeze and you cannot start a car in frozen liquids. So when tourists would come visit in the summertime, of course, all the snow would be melted. It wouldn't be -40, it'd be very comfortable 80 some degrees sometimes. People would ask, "Hey," and this would be 30 years ago, "Hey, do you have electric cars? Because I see outlets everywhere." There are literally outlets in every parking lot that you go to. And we're like, "Oh no, that's for the winterized cars." And you'll notice too, all the cars will have a little plug that hangs from the front of them, right? And what happens is, like I said, in the wintertime, you park your car, you plug it in. The electricity is just given to you by whoever, wherever you park your car at, and it just keeps the liquids in a non-frozen state. Um, and if you don't plug in your car, then you're going to be in a world of hurt, because, again, your car cannot start on frozen liquids. It would even get so bad that when my buddy and I used to go to Denny's, we would just park our car, we'd leave it running with the keys in the ignition, go inside, have our meal, and come out, half an hour, 45 minutes later, because it's easier on the car just to keep it running instead of it. Then you kill the ignition, you have all the liquids cool down, and then a lot of things happen when to mechanical pieces, when you cool them down, heat them up, right, in that short of a time.
Sure.
So it was just easier to just leave the car running, and no one would take your car, no one would steal it from you, because we were all in the same
I was
in
gonna
the
say the same
same
thing
deal
could happen
together.
to
Exactly,
them
right? No one
if,
did
yeah,
that to you.
yeah.
And then one other cute little story I'll leave you with regarding Fairbanks anyway. So at -40, okay, so when you park your car somewhere, the weight of the car naturally flattens out the bottom of your tires. It makes sense,
Hmm.
right? Rubber
Hmm.
and weight and everything. So you would have a flat portion on the bottom of the tire that you generally don't ever pay attention to, because once you get into the car and you start driving, well, the rubber does its thing and just kind of, you don't feel a difference here in most climates. However, at -40, that bottom flatness freezes in place. So when you start driving your car early in the morning at -40, it feels like you're driving on logs for a good minute or two, until finally the rubber heats up enough to where the flat portion kind of evens out. But it's just little things like that if you've never experienced that kind of weather before, you don't know what that means. You don't know what that feels like.
Wow. I'm just thinking of the Flintstones for some reason. Like if they have stones for wheels, they're not quite
Yeah, they'll probably
round.
do a little bit better, right? Until you hit the high speeds and they start flying apart.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah.
So you went then from Alaska to Southern California. Was that your next move?
Yeah. So
So
while
you
I
went
was there, yep.
from some seasons that are beyond frigid to warm,
Yeah, to
tropical.
very warm. I've never seen palm trees up until that point, right? So a lot of that Pacific Ocean, right? All those ocean things that people are accustomed to, that live on those in those areas. I've never seen, again, palm trees for the very first time. So it went from very, very cold. Now, also keep in mind, Fairbanks sure was cold in the wintertime, but we got warm in the summer, right? So don't think
Yeah,
it was
you
always
said
a frozen
80.
landscape.
I thought that was surprising to me. I didn't
No,
realize it would get that warm in the
it's
summer.
surprisingly warm in Fairbanks, right? We also had a lot of mosquitoes up there because of the standing water, right? The ice would
Mhm.
melt, and then you would just have liquid, frozen, or well, not frozen, but you would have standing water everywhere, and it was a breeding pit for mosquitoes. So if you
Yeah.
love mosquitoes, I would say go to Fairbanks, Alaska in the spring or summertime. You'll get your fair share to the point where you'll never want to see a mosquito ever again. Um,
I mean, and to be fair, I'm good without one anyway.
yeah,
But
I think most people are, right.
yeah,
But yeah, no. Then I did a basic training down in San Diego, and I mean, I enjoyed the weather down there. And then even when I got stationed down in Camp Pendleton, which is right between LA and San Diego, we had a good time just being young military guys and go partying in Pacific Beach and a Gaslamp district down in San Diego. So
you
it was a
have
good
to
time.
have a military story or two.
Okay. So I'll give you one that feeds in well with the Alaskan, me being from Alaska. So I had an Alaskan driver's license, which you don't see very many of those down in Southern California, right? Especially not on base. So on base, there was a place called the PX, Personal Exchange, basically like a store where you can buy liquor, you can buy certain groceries too, right? So it's just a convenience store, really. You can go into. Again, it's on base. So one day I decided to buy some liquor, and then the cashier chick, she goes, "Hey, can I see your ID?" I'm like, "Sure." So I pull out my driver's license, I gave it to her, and she goes, "Oh, Alaska. We don't see very many of those here." I'm like, "Yeah, I bet you don't." And then she goes, "It must be pretty warm down there." I'll have your listeners pause. I'm going to pause for a second to give your listeners a minute to think about what could she possibly have meant by down there. Okay. So I kind of looked at her funny and I go, "Down there? What do you mean?" And she goes, "Down there, by Hawaii." And I go, "Where? Hold on. How do you?" And I'm trying to the gears in my head are turning, trying to figure out what the hell she was talking about. And finally, it turns out that what she meant was, okay, when you watch the weather forecast and you see the lower 48 states, right, taking up the majority of the screen, then you see Alaska down by Hawaii, down there. I
Oh
said,
no!
"Oh, honey, no, no. Alaska is way up north. We're right between Canada and Russia. We get -40, during most winter times." And she kind of looked at me funny. She kind of cocks her head to the side and she goes, "Are you sure?" Of course I'm sure. I lived there for 5 years. Come on, man.
So
But
she thought that little detached.
I in the back, she meant well. She didn't mean any
Yeah,
harm by it. But in the back of my head, I'm like, you know what? I hope you stay
yeah,
in school. I just, Alaska
yeah.
being down there, that what, how do you manage that?
That's pretty fantastic. Well,
Yeah.
hey, she learned something that day,
Hopefully.
as long as she believed you.
Yeah, well, but then the additional, "Are you sure?" Like questioning my sanity about it. Be like, "Yeah, no, and of course I'm sure I lived there."
That's incredible. So your time in California, was that strictly military, or did you
Yeah,
stay
so
after?
yeah, so I was there from 2000 to 2004, and that was all military life. And then when I got out, even back then in the early mid 2000s, California was still way too expensive, especially for me being a single dude who didn't have a place to live, didn't have a job lined up. So the next best thing was Las Vegas, and
Yeah.
there's a little story that ties into how I ended up there. There was a girl that I was dating that kind of helped that process along, and yeah, like I said earlier, I decided to just. I thought I would move here for a year, maybe two, and then see where it took me. No, it's been 21 years now, so no, it's treated me well.
Yeah. So, any stories along the way? Anything that stands out that's fun or interesting?
I will say this may be one of the more unsavory stories I'll tell, right? Maybe I wouldn't say illegal, but definitely a little more unsavory. Okay, so when you get out of the military, you have two options. Either you allow the military to move all your possessions for you back to your home
Hmm.
of record. Now, keep in mind, your home of record is wherever you enlisted from, right? So in my case, Fairbanks, Alaska. Okay. Now, if you enlisted out of Montana, then they would just use that as your home of record. So again, two options. They will either move it all for you, right? They pack it all up for you. They put it into a big shipping container. They'll ship it to wherever your home of record is. Or you have the option to do it yourself, right? A do it yourself move. And what that entails is you get a vehicle, you weigh it empty, you get all your stuff, you weigh it fully loaded, you take the difference of the weight of that. Then you multiply that by the amount of miles, and there's some other things that they do mathematically. And basically, they will reimburse you for you moving your stuff back to your home of record. Now, me getting out of the military in Southern California and my home record being 3,300 miles away, I
Hmm.
pulled a fast one and I ended up moving to, like I said, to Las Vegas. And I ended up filling out the paperwork saying that, hey, I drove the 300 miles, all the way through California and Washington and through Canada and then yada, 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 all the way back up to Fairbanks. And I would like to reimburse, please. Now, of course, the return address on that piece of paper stating Las Vegas was just a minor detail that no one caught.
Oh
So
my,
sure enough, a couple of weeks later, I got a check in the mail that actually helped me quite a bit, just financially, kind of get around, kind of figure things out while I was trying to figure out the next move for getting out of the military and into the civilian life.
oh
So
sure.
again, more unsavory story, right? And if you little plug, if you enjoy silly shenanigans like that, I think you'll enjoy the rest of the book stories as well.
Nice. I mean, it's just a very minor white lie. I don't know where you had to drop the truck off. They didn't seem to care where that was left either.
I didn't, they offered it to me. I'm going to take advantage of an opportunity. It's not like I'm going to leave it at that.
Wonderful. So, at what point did you start to travel outside of the country?
Yeah.
Had you done anything before, or was it not until you were settled in Vegas? I mean,
Yeah,
besides obviously living and being raised in Germany.
sure. So actually, I've done quite a bit more traveling here over the last couple of years. I was working at one point for a company, actually for Patron, the liquor company, and we had the international offices in Switzerland. And me speaking German, my boss decided to send me to Switzerland on a few occasions just to help them with their IT effort. One other cute little story I can tell you from that was, so my boss came with me one day to go to Switzerland, right? I mean, it was the company paid for it, and it's like, oh no, send me to Europe again on the company's time. No, please don't. Ah, it's fine. I'll
Right.
totally do
That's
that,
the
right?
worst part of the
That's the
job.
worst, right? I tell you. So at one point, the boss comes with me, and we're working out of the office there in Switzerland, and he says, "Hey, Andy, go ahead and call the telephone company. We need." I forgot what he wanted. He needs some information. He says, talk to them. You speak German and ask them for XYZ, whatever technical details. I'm like, okay, I'm on it. And then had this, I froze for a second because, well, okay, it's one thing to speak conversational German. It's another thing to ask for technical details. And I was quite rusty in my German. I can have a conversation with someone, say, how are you? How you been? Just have the usual back and forth. But once you start getting to some of the more technical vocabulary, I just did not know, right? I could read it just fine, but I still don't understand what those terms were. So with my boss within earshot, I had this mini freak out moment of, oh crap, what do I do? Like, do I pull up a English to German translator online real quick and punch in the words I want to ask him? No, that'll take way too long. What do I do? And again, my boss was right there within earshot, so I had to come up with something. So I picked up the phone, dialed the number, and I with all my German speaking prowess, I was able to say, "Do you have anyone who speaks English?" I kid you not. My boss from the other room said, "What?" And once the call was over, he says, "I fly you out here on the company's dime because you speak German or you claim to." Blah blah blah, just going on and on. I'm like, "Look, boss, you asked me to get something done. I got it done. I don't know what to tell you."
What are they going to do? Fly back? I mean,
I mean, God
they're going to
forbid,
fly you
right?
back anyway.
So part of those whatchamacallit, part of that travel that we did for that company, my boss and I went also to a couple other places, kind of on the company's ish dime. We went to France, we went to Germany for a little bit, the UK as well. And I will say, France. Now we went probably during the worst time of the year. It was cold, it was rainy, it was wet. It wasn't a very pleasant time to be out there. However, when we went to the Eiffel Tower, I was so explosively underwhelmed. Like we showed up, I looked at it, I kind of awed at the construction. I'm like, yeah, it's a big
Mhm.
tall tower made out of, I guess, steel. I don't even know, right? And then I
Yeah.
was like, all right, I'm done looking at it. There was nothing for me there. Maybe I missed the whole cultural aspect of it, but I was completely underwhelmed by being in the presence of the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah. I mean, probably unpopular opinion, but I could absolutely see that. I've not seen it in person, but the only time that it really seems to do anything for me in photos at least is at night when it's lit up. It looks really really beautiful.
Yeah.
But otherwise, yeah, it's just a big steel tower.
Yeah, ta-da! Right, at least the
Yeah.
Leaning Tower of Pisa has something going for itself. It's leaning, right? You do the if you, I've never been there, but if you were to, you do the whole, you push it up against do the photo
Hmm.
where you push it, and it's like, all right, you and everybody else, right? You're not unique in that regard. But I will say, travel wise, a couple years ago, right before the pandemic, I took a Europe trip where I went to. It was first Italy. There's a little place called Positano along the Amalfi Coast. Most
Hmm.
beautiful place I've been to. If I could choose a place to retire, it would probably be there if I could afford it. Right? It's a beautiful little town. Like I said, tucked away in between these mountain ranges, or these hills rather, along the Amalfi Coast. It's just a beautiful little spot. If you can, I would absolutely recommend you visit it. Spend a couple days in Naples, and then I took a train all the way up the Italian coast into Switzerland. I was up there in where was it called? Lauterbrunnen, the place where they filmed The Sound of Music. And wherever you look, I don't know, it just, everything's a postcard. The beauty that you get from the postcards, it is just like that, right? There's these running waterfalls from God knows how high up, and these talling, rolling mountains. It's hard to describe, right? But if you type in Lauterbrunnen into Google Images, it looks just like that, 100%. It's just gorgeous.
Yeah, I love seeing places like that in person. And we've talked about this on other episodes too, that sometimes there's just no way to see something in a photograph or in a
Yeah,
video and have it do it justice.
yeah,
Even as beautiful as it looks in a photo,
yeah. I
it's
will,
some things
and
are
I'll,
just stunning and breathtaking in person.
Yeah, I agree. And I will say the same thing about the Northern Lights, right? Sometimes now the Northern Lights that you see like curated on TikTok or YouTube or images or whatever, we didn't get them quite like that every night. We did have, you look up in the sky, for the most part, you see these kind of greenish, colors, strands or kind of curtainy waving patterns or whatever. Rarely do they get really, really bright and really colorful, but when they do, it's a spectacular light show. The other one was the Grand Canyon. We've been there
Mm.
once, and just the size is so breathtaking. There is no picture in the world that does the size of the Grand Canyon any justice. Because you look at it, right? Because the picture can only take up so much room on your screen and can only take up so much room in whatever, wherever you look at it. Until you experience it for yourself, you get that full 360-degree vision, or at least, the 180-degree vision that your eyes can give you. Until you see it in person, no picture can do the Grand Canyon justice. It just can't. It's just so enormous and so just like breathtaking.
Hmm. Yeah, and I've not been there either. It's a place that I'm sure I'll get to one day.
Yeah.
But I've been to other places that have that sort of awe
Yeah.
inspiring beauty. Yeah. So before we go to Asia,
Yeah.
because I definitely want to get there at one
Yep.
point, you've told me of some beautiful places and some little stories. There's got to be more. There's got to be some. I feel like you're kind of a crazy guy. I feel like there's got to be
I've
some craziness somewhere. And you also wrote a book. You don't have to give away all the stories in the book, but
Let me
something
think here.
from Europe.
Yeah. Let me think about this for a second.
And so when those trips to Europe, were those all for Patron?
Not all, right? So the ones that I described to you when I went with my boss, those were for
Okay.
Patron, yes. The one I went for to Italy and Switzerland, that was just a personal trip that happened right before
Okay.
the pandemic. Funny story about that. Guess we'll spill some personal details here. So I was
Nobody's listening.
great, just you and me, right? You and me and our higher powers. How higher powers will judge us for this later on, right?
Yes.
So
Or at
I
least you.
was I was dating someone leading right up to the trip to Europe, and my brother was turning 40. There was a couple other things that were happening, so it was a good time for us to do a Europe trip, or at least a Germany trip. And she took it upon herself to say, "Well, I want to go visit Italy. I want to go visit Switzerland. I want to go da da da." I'm like, "Cool. Well, set it up. Get the Airbnbs, get the flights, and I'll put my credit card on it, and then we'll go." Right? Perfect. So she, set up this whole travel package for us, right? And then things happened between the two of us, and we ended up splitting up. And I told her, like, and this was right between us planning the trip and us going onto the trip. And I
Hmm.
told her, look, the tickets are in my name and they're in your name. I cannot prevent you from going, right? However, just know that if you were to go, we're not going to be traveling together, right? We're not together. We're not traveling. We're not traveling together. So she did the right thing by saying, you go in and travel on your own, and you enjoy the trip. So in my mind, I was like, good, that was the right answer. And I will say, I had the best freaking time on the travel package that she put together. So I feel just a little bad about it, but I'm like, look, it wasn't my fault, how things transpired. It wasn't, due to anything that I did. So I will just say, hey, thanks for the travel arrangements, because I had the best freaking time while I was there.
I was just going to say, have you ever thanked her publicly or thanked her?
No,
There you
no,
go.
I've paid my dues
Yeah.
in that relationship, so I think I'm scot free here.
Yeah. What kind of stuff did you do on your own?
While I was there, you mean, or
Yeah.
otherwise?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, both.
Yeah. So there was even a section in the book that I talk about where, when you come to a fork in the road, take it. Right.
Hmm.
I've talked to somebody else about this recently, and the question was, how do you go about making these experiences that you talk about in your book? And I tell them, like, look, I think life has this really interesting way of beckoning you to make your own experiences, throughout. throughout the life that you live here. However, you're not going to experience any of that if you're going to be locked up in your room playing video games and watching YouTube all day. Now, if that's your cup of tea, if that's what you want to do, be my guest. I'm not going to say that that's not the right way to live your life. However you want to live your life is your choice. However, if you wake up one day and you realize that, hey, a decade has flashed by your eyes and you have nothing to show for it, and you're not very
Mhm.
happy with your experiences so far, then that's on you, nobody else, right? So again, I think that life beckons and is more than happy to give you those experiences, but you have to go out there and make at least the initial move to make that happen. One little story I can tell you from one, I think it was the last night in Positano. I went out and I enjoy making the single serving friends, right? Whether you sit at the bar, make friends with the people that sit next to you, or you go to, I don't know, the music event, you just make your 5 minute friends here, say, hey, how you doing? Where you from, that kind of stuff, right? Just very innocent, very, very casual conversation. Then you part ways and you probably don't ever see each other again. But it's those kind of experiences that, in my opinion, make those kind of trips worthwhile, that you have a connection with someone, whether it be for 5 minutes or for 5 hours, but you make a connection with someone, it's positive, and then off you go. And then you make a connection with somebody else somewhere else. I was ready to turn in for the night. I was ready to walk back to the Airbnb that I had there, and then as I was turning onto the street to take me back to the room, there was this little wine bar that happened to be open. There was maybe four people sitting in it, I guess, just having glasses of wine. So I figured, screw it. I have another half an hour, 45 minutes before bedtime, or at least the what I thought would be bedtime. And I decided just to poke my head in and see what they had to offer. Sat down, got a glass of wine, started making small talk with the two couples that were there. Turns out they were all Americans as well. Start making small talk with them. And then as one thing led to the other, at one point, one of the couples retired to go home. But the other couple said, hey, do you want to stay out with us for a bit? I think there is a club or like a live music thing down the street. I'm like, sure. And I had just enough liquor in me to be awake again. And I will say, and I'll leave some of the details out and I'll leave it to you to read in the book. That night was probably one of the most fun-filled nights I've had on that trip. And that wouldn't have happened had I not said to myself, hey, maybe pop my head in here for a second, let me get a glass of wine and see where the night takes us. Now, of course, that's not a guarantee to say that any decision that you make will end up in a story worth experience, but otherwise it's not going to happen either way, right? So again, my recommendations are just take a chance, go take advantage of what life throws at you and say yes to things you normally wouldn't, and see where it takes you.
Yeah, absolutely, 1,000%. And not even, and I agree with you, especially for solo traveling. But even if you're not, if you're traveling with some friends or a couple or whatever, I still like to talk to other travelers, to locals, to whomever, strike up conversations. Some of the most incredible stories and experiences I have are from doing exactly that, like you said,
Yeah,
because even whether it's other travelers or locals, you're going to do things that you probably wouldn't do or see
yeah.
things that you wouldn't see. And I mean, I even remember we were in we were in Prague. It was winter. It was November, and we were there to see the
Markets,
Christmas
yeah.
markets. Yeah,
They're
and
huge in
so
Europe. My God, they're gorgeous too.
oh man, we went to 15 or 20 of them in the course of a week. And so we traveled. We actually took a Bolt because it's not Uber there.
Hmm.
We took a Bolt from Prague to Germany,
Hmm.
actually. And the ride there was a good, oh man, 3.5, 4 hours, something like that. And a lot of people will just sit in the cab ride and just keep to themselves and look at
Sure.
their phone and whatever. I talked to this driver the entire time.
Yeah.
My wife and daughter were in the back seat doing whatever they were doing, and he and I just had the most incredible conversation. Got his phone number because we thought,
You
hey,
just,
we're,
you
we're
just,
going to go back to
yeah.
Prague at some point.
Oh
Maybe
yeah.
we'll catch up. And yeah, just really, I'll never forget that ride
Yeah.
just because
100%.
it was really, really cool.
And that person probably won't either, right? I mean, that
Yeah.
person probably made a friend. Hopefully.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, we haven't kept in touch, but again, yeah, something I'll never forget.
For sure, right? And I think some of the more rewarding times are when someone hits you up completely randomly, and you're like, "Hey, I talked to you 5 years ago." Or even give you an example. Me and the girlfriend went to Hawaii a couple of months ago, and on the flight there, we started making friends with the stewardess, and we hit it off with her so well that she got her number, and we said, "Hey, if we're ever back in Vegas, come hang out with us. We'll get a drink." Just very casual, right? If you do, great. If you don't, you don't. But it's
Yeah.
those kind of interactions, those 5 minute friendships, right? That I think just make your day better, make their day better, right? Even as I have this habit of taking candy with me wherever I go, right? So single serving candy, for example, Sour Patch Kids, right? Now you have to get the individually wrapped ones. You'll see why in a second, right? Don't
Yeah,
just get a
please don't
handful
do
of.
loose.
No,
Loose
don't do that,
Sour
right?
Patch Kids in
But
your
I
pocket.
almost every time when I leave the house, I'll take a handful with me, put it in a pocket, because when you go interact with someone, whether it be the person giving you, at the grocery store that wraps up your fish for you, or the person that checks you out, the cashier person, or just anyone you interact with, right? Give them a piece of candy. It doesn't cost you anything, and they're always, almost always, so pleasantly surprised and so shocked that anyone even is going out of their way to give them something, right? I didn't have to do that. They know that. It doesn't cost me anything. And it brightens up their day for a minute, maybe 5 minutes. And I bet you money that some people remember that. They're like, hey, this random person came in and gave me a piece of candy. And it was just the effort that counted, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Isn't it a terrible message of the state of the world that something as simple of a gesture like that is not common anymore?
It's
Like
kind of sad, right?
just
Yeah.
kindness.
Yeah, me and the lady went to get food the other day, and we just started the conversation with a gal, who took her order. And we're like, "Hey, how are you? Good. How are you? Good. What do we recommend?" Just very, just a very casual, how's your day and what do you recommend? And we just had a very casual, very nice, very cordial little 2 minute conversation. And then she gave us like 30% off just because we were chill with her. And to your point, like how sad is the state of affairs that just being a decent human being is enough to warrant someone to give you a discount on food and drink. Maybe she was giving, but then again, that comes to show that it goes both ways, right? Your good deed sometimes doesn't go unpunished, right? In the most positive ways.
Yeah. And sometimes I preach this in my job as well. Like you don't know what somebody's day is like. And
Yeah,
this could apply to anything, daily life, travel, travel especially
yeah,
because some tourists can be unpleasant.
yeah,
And
fair.
so you just never know what somebody's going through that day or in that moment. So when you take that extra gesture of kindness, that could really turn someone's day around. It could
Yeah.
really save their day from being awful and whatever and make it into a happy ending of their day or whatever.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, 100%.
yeah, just be kind, people.
Yeah,
Come on.
just be. I think Buddha. Can I swear on this show? Right? I think Buddha said it. Just don't be a dick. I think Buddha literally said that.
I think that is the quote. Actually, I
Yeah,
think you got it right. Yeah, so that's good.
in Sanskrit. Not
Yeah,
English, but whatever.
yeah. Through translation.
That's right. Loosely translated.
Yeah. So we're going to head the other way now, since you
Yeah.
told me you went to Hawaii and that's not on your list. So we've had quite a few people that have told stories of Hawaii. Obviously, it is one of the most beautiful places to go. A friend of mine lives there, so he told a lot about it. But
Hmm.
I don't think we can get enough. So, do you have anything from Hawaii before we head across the Pacific
Sure.
to Asia?
Sure. So it was my first trip to Hawaii, our first trip to Hawaii, I will say. We went to the Big Island for a good couple of days, and we drove that sucker. We rented a car, and I just said, look, we're going to drive it from, we were on the west coast of the Big Island, and the west side. And then we drove, I think the first day we drove right through it from west to east, and then we hooked it the south path down, always down south and then back west again. And the next day we went, where did we go? We went northwest, kind of cut across our northern coast, and then we drove it back through the center going the other way. And then we went almost to the top of the volcano there, and we got to, like, there's a little, not quite the summit, but right before the summit there's a little stop that you have to get acclimated to the thin air, and they'll have you sit there for about half an hour to an hour till you get acclimated to it. They'll tell you put the car in 4-wheel drive and all that good stuff, because there's a bit of a steep incline there to get to the top of it. We chose not to get to the top of it just because of other things that were going on. But we got a good view of what the island had to offer, just driving, across all the main roads that it offered us. We went to one area that had these natural geysers, right? These was it what the hot air geysers that just out of the ground came this hot air like 24/7, and you can stick your head in it, and then you pull it back out because it is just hot air coming out of there. And so there's still a lot of very live nature that's happening there. We went to one. There was a lava cave where it literally just dug this walkable area right out of, I guess, lava just flowed through it enough to where
Yeah.
it left this cave in place. We can walk from one end to the other.
They call them
Kind of
lava
tucked away in the
tubes, I've
jungle there.
learned. Yeah.
What's that?
They call them lava tubes, I've learned.
Lava, yeah, okay, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
And I think that latter part was on, where we go to. We went to the Honolulu island. We ended up not going to Maui. We wanted to, but it didn't work out for other reasons. But overall, I can totally see the appeal of Hawaii. The weather was just gorgeous the entire time. The people were genuinely friendly, and I thought, well, Hawaii is just this tiny little island. What could it possibly have to offer? Well, it's not just one island, and they're not just
Right.
tiny little islands. They're very very decent sized islands that you can spend a lot of time on. And if island fever is a thing, I don't know, I wasn't there long enough, but people say, look, there's you can do anything here that you can do on the mainland. And I think they're absolutely right. So if I had the means, maybe retirement in Hawaii isn't the worst idea. It
Mm.
really is a beautiful place, right? So I highly recommend you go. Speaking of Hawaii, real quick, I was when I graduated high school, they gave away, it was a school sponsored graduation party, and they gave away three prizes. One was a used car, one was a laptop, and one was a trip to Hawaii. Well, I ended up winning the trip to Hawaii. Now, mind you, this is in the late 90s, the graduation class of 99 kind of dates me a little bit. I'm like, holy crap, I want a trip to Hawaii. This is again in Fairbanks where I, spent my high school years.
Yeah.
And then as I went to go collect my prize, the lady was like, well, we don't know when you're going to go or who you're going to take with. So we're just going to give you a check for $1,000 and send you on your way. Well, nowhere on that check, nowhere in the paperwork, well, I didn't even sign any paperwork, but nowhere did it say I had to spend this on a trip to Hawaii. And then looking into it, like flying from Fairbanks to Hawaii and spending a couple of days there, $1,000 would have maybe covered the flight. That's about it. Not a whole lot more than that. So then I decided in my infant wisdom, I was a 19-year-old, a high school graduate. I decided to blow that money on a big screen TV and a DVD player. So money well spent.
I'm sure you saw a video of Hawaii on
You
that TV
know,
at some point. At some point.
that made up for it. Absolutely.
Oh my gosh. What a
Crack me up.
ripoff. That high school. Jeez.
Hey man, $1,000 when you're 19 years old, especially doing that, doing that
Yeah.
in that time that's a lot of money.
And late 90s was a decent amount. Although the TVs cost a lot more back then.
Yeah,
So
it wasn't even a flat screen. Flat screens haven't even come out yet. I think it was like a 29-inch, like big tube television. I will say, however, the DVD player that I bought ended up playing. So CD burners were a thing that were coming
yep.
out right around that time, and VCDs and SVCDs were a thing back in those days too. So we end up buying, with my
Forgot
buddy's
about these.
help, we end up buying. I end up buying a DVD player that could play VCDs and SVCDs, and to test this. Now, mind you, this is the late 90s. To test this out, my buddy ended up running home, ended up getting an SVCD that he had laying around, and we went to, I think it was Sears or some sort of department store, and we were trying to find a model that really played these SVCDs because not all DVD players did it back in the day. So what he did, he grabs this SVCD, pops it into the DVD player at Sears. This particular DVD player was plugged into all the TVs that were on display there. And what happens as he presses play? Star Wars Episode 1 comes in big bright letters. And there people are walking by, they're like, wait a minute, didn't this movie just come out 2 weeks ago? I'm like, yep, it did. No comment. This DVD player does it. We'll buy this one.
Nice. Hmm.
Good times.
Didn't know there were
Again,
pirates in
unsavory moments,
Alaska.
some questionable decision making. If you like that story, there are many more.
Yeah. Okay. Before I know we're getting close because you have a little bit of a time crunch tonight. I want to hear anything you have from. I mean, South Korea is very interesting to me, and Thailand. I love the culture and what I've seen of Thailand. I still
Yeah.
have to get there.
Yeah. I will say that the Southeast Asia trip that we did just a couple of years ago was probably one of the most enjoyable couple of weeks that we did, right? And I will say that, so we went to South Korea, went to Seoul, Busan, and we ended up checking a couple of the DMZ areas right between South and North Korea. I've always had this weird fascination with North Korea and just being at the DMZ and
Hmm.
seeing from the touristy spot, just looking across from the outlook that we had. Hey, on this side, it's all North Korea, right? You couldn't see a whole lot because not a whole lot was happening, but what you're seeing there is North Korea. That just blew my mind, right? That something that we can learn about here is such a close reality to people that live there, right? You just don't realize that until you see it. So it really was a bit of an eye-opening experience. I will say that the people that we ran into were genuinely, and I really mean that they were just genuinely nice people. We ended up pulling into this little village not far from the DMZ area. It was getting late in the day. The sun was setting. We were supposed to have gotten a room somewhere. We were just kind of, I wouldn't say we were lost, but we were trying to figure out, hey, let's get something to eat and then kind of see where it takes us. We ended up pulling into this little village where I must have been the only white guy within a 50-mile radius. So of course my girlfriend being Korean, she was my translator, right? So I had my in with her. So we ended up walking into this little mom and pop restaurant. And when I say mom and pop, I really mean mom and pop. The dad or the guy had his feet up watching TV, right? And the mom was I don't know, cleaning stuff around him. Then when we walked in, he was like, "Oh crap, customers," right?
Mm-hmm.
So he turned the TV off and he made himself busy. And then the lady came out, and my girlfriend and her were talking back and forth. And of course, I didn't understand much or really any of it. And then at one point, I could have sworn that the lady looked at me, and then she looked at my girlfriend, and she goes, I can only assume what she was asking in Korean was, "Does your man eat meat?" Yeah, and then, "Does your man eat spicy?" And to which she must have replied, "Yes, he does," and "Yes, he does." So the mom then hurries into the kitchen, which you can see from where you're sitting. It's just one big room, right? One section was the dining area, and the other section was the kitchen. And I kind of watched her through the crack that they had open there. She was going to town. She made a meal with a capital M, and she brought this food out. And I mean, the aroma just filled the entire room, and it was probably one of the best dishes. And you can tell it wasn't just good because it was delicious. It was good because the lady put so much effort into it, and it was a delicious meal because of those reasons. And then when it was done, it was spicy. It had a lot of good meat in it. It was really, really spicy. Now, my girlfriend is a little more sensitive to the spicy food, and it was almost too spicy for me. So I could only imagine how much pain that she was in. But after I got done finishing my plate, I said, "Can I have some more?" And the lady was like, "Hell yeah." Of course, in Korean, I could have sworn she said, "Hell yeah, you can." She started shoveling more food on my plate. It's like, this white boy needs to eat. Here you go.
Do you know what you ate? Do you know what was in that on
It
that
was
dish?
intestines. For sure it was intestines,
Okay.
right? But it was delicious. I don't know what else was in it, but it was delicious.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Delicious meal.
That was in South Korea, you said,
In
right?
South Korea,
So,
a sleepy little village that we pulled into, not too far from it was on the east coast of South Korea, kind of by the DMZ that's bordering, like in the northeastern corner of South Korea. We drove south, maybe like an hour or so, and then it was just a little tiny little village that was right there.
do you think that having some sort of fascination with the DMZ area, do you think that has any, that you having been in the military has anything to do with each other? Or just,
I never developed that interest while I was in the military. And North Korea has always been this kind of soft spot for me, right? Once I found out that they're really, and I think we're so in the Western world, we can be so disconnected from things that are happening in the rest of the world, right? I think we kind of isolated, especially we are fed nothing but, U.S. news and U.S. nonsense and all this other stuff that we have enough to worry about here. No, don't get me wrong. But I feel like even the news the news can be very skewed towards what's happening here and here only. When you listen to the news like Al Jazeera, or hell, even some of the more translated news programs from Europe, or hell, just listen to the BBC. There's a lot more world news that they give you, not just the local news that's pertinent to the country there. But again, I think that we get so easily isolated. And then when I found out that there's a place in the world still that is so backwards and so isolated, North Korea, I'm like, wait a minute, there's a place like that still, like, to this day. And then once I found out about that, I just had this weird fascination with it. Start watching documentaries, and and I hear that if we really 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 wanted to, I may want to see if I can dust off my German passport and get like one of those old touristy programs from China, and just pretend like I'm a German national, which I can maybe still pull off, and then maybe do the North Korean tour from there. But again, there's also been some horror stories about some certain tourists being held back, and then some rather unpleasant things happen to those people, right? So I'm like, is it worth the risk? I don't know. It's one of those, maybe wish it, maybe dream it, but pull the trigger, maybe not.
it would make for a heck of a second edition of your book.
My God, yes. German and North Korea, how about that?
Yeah.
Play really stupid games, win really stupid prizes, right?
And the book, I won't go that far. Okay. So, okay, let's get to Thailand
Yeah,
before we
sure.
run out of time.
Yeah,
Please.
so we did the touristy places. We went Bangkok, we went to Chiang Mai to play with. I say play with. We went to this elephant sanctuary. That was a really, really, really good experience. Caretakers there told us that these elephants were rescues from various places within the area. Even they told us about the places where they have you ride on their elephants. Turns out that is not a good thing for the elephants whatsoever. Right? It's a very touristy thing that, sure, they make money with it, but it's not a, I don't know. It's just not a positive thing for the animals whatsoever. There are even some videos out there where you can go to these like lion reserves, and you can go up there and pet the lions. Yeah, but they were so heavily sedated that these lions can't even attack you even if they wanted to. And I'm like, dude, what the hell? They're putting these animals on Xanax and they zonk them out so much so just so you as a dumb tourist can go up there and take a picture with them. Like how
Right.
messed up with that? Like that's just so, oh, there's just so many things wrong with that picture. Anywho, we went to this animal sanctuary and we spend a good almost the entire day there. And you play with these animals, you feed them, you wash them slash clean them, you walk through the mud with them, you I don't know, you just have a good time being up close and personal with these. I mean, they're larger than life. If you've never been up close to an elephant, they are humongous when you stand next to them. But it really was a really, really cool experience. We were there with a couple other tourists. They were there from all over the world as well, made friends there with them. It was just a really good experience. So if you ever have a chance to go to one of those animal sanctuaries, go to a sanctuary. Do not go to one of those touristy spots where they have you ride on them. Go to a sanctuary. We actually do work with the caretakers and work with the animals. That, in my opinion, is a much, much more pleasant experience.
Yeah. Go to a place where if you're going to try to pet the lion, you will get hurt.
Yeah, I hope, I don't wish ill on anyone, but if you go to one of those places and you want to pet a lion, I hope you get clawed, okay? Maybe you should just walk away with a big fat scar on your face. Don't get mauled, right? Don't get killed, but, you should just you should pay for your actions, okay? You know better.
Hey, lifelong memories.
However, if I get a scar across my face from petting a lion, I would say, well, if it isn't the consequences of my own actions.
Yeah. And you'd probably be a legend at the same time that
Hell
it would
yeah.
work out to be that way.
Where's your
So,
tiger claw scar, huh?
exactly. Right.
You peasant. So we
So,
did, yeah, we
yeah.
did Bangkok, Chiang Mai. We went to the Bangkok market. There was a market that only happens either on the weekend or only during certain times of the year, and it was humongous. You show up to this thing, and you've been to. I've been to the mall in the Gaslamp where you just show up, you walk into it, it's 2 city blocks with just mall
Hmm.
area, 3 stories tall both sides, and you're like, wow, this is huge. But you show up to these markets in Bangkok. Well, it's a little bit outside, not it's a little bit of distance from the city center of Bangkok, but you show up to these markets. I forgot the name of it, but it is humongous with a capital H. It's just unfathomable how large these markets are, and you can get literally anything, and just the amount of traffic of people. Hell, you can just go there and get a massage for an hour if you wanted to. I
Hmm.
mean, literally anything that you want to get is available to you there. There's stray cats running around, right? You can pet them. It's just a lot is happening, and there's people from all over the world visit them. It was just a good time. Um,
They're selling their wares and they're selling food too, right?
Yeah. Oh my God.
I
Yes.
mean,
The
I
food,
love
the
markets like that.
fruit. My God. The mangoes, the dragon fruit. It's just so
Hmm.
sweet and so succulent and so delicious there. When you come back to the States, you're like, I'll have a mango. Like, no, you don't. Like, it's trash food here. I'm sorry. I don't know what it is, right? If it's not natively grown here, maybe if it's freeze dried and shipped here, then maybe that's one thing. But you just cannot get produce like you do over there. You just can't.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm saying yeah, I don't know, but I've had mango fresh in Costa Rica, if I'm not
My God.
mistaken, and it is completely different than
So
mango
much
here.
better.
I would
Yep.
almost rather buy frozen chunks of
Yep.
mango here than a fresh mango.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the only way you can preserve the flavor. If it's frozen there at the source, like flash frozen or freeze dried or whatever the term is, you will get, I think, the actual flavor and the deliciousness. Here, I hate buying mangoes here. I love mangoes, but I hate buying them here because the only time when they're in season is like a 2 week window. I think in April when they were good, when they're actually like juicy and soft. Other than that, you just get them hard and just not tasting well. But
Yeah.
that's me. That's me. My first world problem that the mangoes aren't sweet enough.
But it's one of those things like we talk about even with travel and with real life. Like if you live in your bubble, you don't know any different. If that's the only
Yeah.
mango you've ever had and you like it, great. But when you've had a fresh mango
Like a
somewhere,
real good mango from like tropical area, right?
now suddenly your life has expanded, your taste
A
palette has
whole
expanded, and
new
it's
world, right? Absolutely. The rest of Thailand, we went through some of the smaller villages as well. It really was just a phenomenal time. I will say that the people that we ran into, very much like in Korea, people in Thailand were genuinely, not really mean that, were genuinely nice wherever you went. Even if you don't speak the language, if you tried, I mean, everything is, if you go sit down at a restaurant, you can mostly just point at things, right? You can buy a lot just with being nonverbal about things. And you say yes and thank you and all the good stuff. And ultimately, money is the universal language too. So that gets you far if you need to. And the conversion rate, right? The what you call it, the exchange rate, right, between dollars and the baht in Thailand is extremely cheap. I wouldn't say like pennies on the dollar, but everything is much cheaper there, right? Whether it be the food, or the merchandise, or the clothes or whatever, right? So um, I would strongly recommend making the trip over there just because it was just a great time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's on my list. It was a place I
Please
almost
go.
went a couple of years ago, but I will be there. So I know, again, said it a few times, kind of up against it a little bit. So I'll wrap with my final five questions,
Yeah,
and then we. I'd love to do this again
let's do
when we
that.
have a little more time. We can feel a little more relaxed.
Yeah,
So, first question: of all the places in the world, not at home,
not at home.
your favorite meal you've ever had? Doesn't have to be in a restaurant. Favorite meal you've had anywhere outside the home?
I think would have to be that one in Korea in the village. Again, not because it was delicious, yes, but it was made with such love and such care. It came out in the flavor, 100%.
Yeah. Okay.
And it was intestines, right? Some that most people would be turned off by. It was just a delicious meal that
Yeah.
you can tell was made with love, lots of love.
Something else I've never tried, but I would be willing to. I'll try almost anything as far as
Hmm.
food goes. I tell everyone I had guinea pig when I was in South America
Oh,
and
okay.
didn't know that I would ever do that. So,
Okay, I had
yeah.
chicken hearts once, and I didn't know what it was before, and I ate it, and then I said, "Tastes kind of like chicken." I was like, "Yeah, because it's chicken hearts," and then I couldn't eat it after that.
Oh, really? Yeah, the mental side of it.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. So, question two: where in the world have you been that even if I said to you, here's a free trip, go enjoy yourself, you would say, nope, I'm good. I don't need to go back?
I've been to Missouri. There was not a whole lot there. Sorry for all the people who are from Missouri. I just was not very impressed by it.
Yeah.
I would say even I hate to say this, but even like Paris, I just was not. I wasn't too impressed by Paris. Maybe we didn't go to the right areas. Maybe we weren't the right mindset. I just was not too. I just there was nothing for me there. It was just maybe I haven't been from Europe. I wasn't too wowed by it, but I was just underwhelmed by Paris downtown with the Eiffel Tower and all that. Even the restaurants. We went to a supposedly it was a 2-star Michelin restaurant, and I enjoyed it, but it just wasn't. Just doesn't mean much to me.
Yeah. Well, and for what it's worth, like I've talked to people who say like even a like the fine dining experience isn't really their thing. So it's not that you don't necessarily enjoy the meal. The food may be fantastic,
Yeah.
but sometimes it's the experience itself is like what matters more, and sometimes it's better to be relaxed and just
Yeah.
in having fun with family or friends or whoever, and
Yeah.
so that can make
Real
a
quick, since you
difference.
mentioned places that we traveled, so as being member of Patron, we flew down to Guadalajara in Mexico a few times, and we drove out to El Totonilco, which is the plant where they actually have the processing of the agave plant. And funny story about that, during that time there was some political turmoil, and we were white slash American slash Western. We worked for Patron, sure, but we're just tourists to the eyes of many there. So they actually had to escort us with an armored vehicle just to make sure that the cartels wouldn't get funny and try to kidnap us, because that was happening at the time in that area. So just one of those times when we drove through certain areas of Mexico, and I told myself I should not be here right now. It all worked out
Wow,
okay. But there were definitely some times when I'm like, what would happen in the worst case scenario? Not good things, no.
that's incredible. Were you scared at all?
There were, like I said, there were a few moments of I shouldn't be here.
Yeah, yeah,
Scared, yeah, maybe it was bordering that. Yeah, I mean, we were safe with the people we were with. It was during broad daylight, but still, just the idea that you had an armored vehicle escorting you is a little surreal.
yeah. That's insane. Okay, so flipping from the where would you not go again?
Yeah.
Where of all the places, I may know the answer, where of all the places in the world that you have been, do you absolutely have to go again?
Yeah, I would go back to Positano in a heartbeat. If you have the opportunity, I would heavily recommend you go there. I was in Naples a few days after that. I would not recommend Naples, at least downtown. I'm sure it has
Mhm.
its own charm. It to me was very dirty. It was very it was a huge it was a it was a night and day from the experience in Positano going to Naples. So
Yeah, Naples still has some history. There's some nice churches there if you're
yeah,
into that kind of stuff. But
for sure.
I know what you mean by that. It was
Naples
definitely
reminded me of
different than
downtown Tijuana on a bad Saturday night. It
okay.
wasn't it was not enjoyable.
Yeah,
And that's I'm apologizing to all people who love the place. Right? I'm just saying my experience was not favorable.
yeah. Okay, question five.
Yeah,
Of all the places in the world that you have not gone, this is not like a bucket list thing. Where do you absolutely have to go?
I would love to go to Croatia. I've heard nothing but phenomenal things. I've seen nothing but phenomenal pictures. People have gone there say yes, you absolutely have to go to Croatia. So that's on the list for someday.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll have to do some research. Of course, I know of, but I've never heard anyone that's gone there. So
Yeah.
I'll try to find someone, get them on the
Yeah,
show
if you
for you.
type in Croatia into Google Images, it is, I mean, poster cards. It's just gorgeous from what you can tell.
Yeah.
Gorgeous.
And bonus question
Yeah.
6. Never asked anyone this one before.
Wait, there was not question 5? Okay, go ahead.
That was, yeah. I did the meal, never again, must again. I'm sorry, there is question 5. Bonus question before question
Okay.
5.
Okay.
How much do you like Star Wars?
How much? So for your listeners who can't see, I have Lego Star Wars, various Lego Star Wars spaceships hanging from the ceiling, and right behind me over my right shoulder is the big Millennium Falcon. It doesn't look like much from here if you see it on the screen here, but this beast behind me is about 20 pounds, and it took me about a month to put it together. It was a fun build. If you're into Star Wars, if you like Legos, if you can afford it, it's not cheap. If you can afford it, I'd strongly recommend you get it. But then you have to figure out a place to put it, because it is an awkwardly big Millennium Falcon that you have to find a place for.
So you gave no thought of dismantling it so you could put it together again someday?
You know what? I've done it once. I'm happy with the result.
So that's a trip you're not taking again.
I have a feeling that maybe a nephew or maybe a kid will come by one day and just rip it down and it'll go into a million pieces. Maybe then I'll consider it. But until then, it's good where it is.
Very nice. And the final question.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Question 5.
Yeah.
The true question 5 is, where are you going? Anything planned?
Oh, okay. So you mean like more? Okay, I was gonna go deep for a second here. We can go that. We can go. So no, actually, my
No, where are you going
my
tonight?
lady and I, my my lady and I have a trip planned to go to Europe in July. We're gonna fly into the UK, then hop into go to Portugal, do Madrid, Spain. For each place, we're gonna do about 3 or 4 days, and then go to Berlin to see my family. And then the cherry on top of that little ice cream sundae is going to be, we're going to take a train over to either Belgium or the Netherlands for Tomorrowland. It's a big music festival that happens on that side of the world. It's like the European version of EDC. If you've ever heard of any of those places, that'll mean something to you. But Tomorrowland is on the list for July. And then we're going to fly back to the UK, spend a few days there, and then come back. So it's going to be a 3-week, hop Europe trip coming up, like I said, in July, and we're looking forward to that quite a bit.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. The one that stood out to me, which I've heard nothing but good about, is Portugal.
Yeah.
I've had people rave about that as well.
Yeah.
Recent addition to my list. So,
and to kind of go a little more esoteric on your question, where you said, where are you going? I thought more like spiritually speaking, right? And it's kind of like the interview question, where do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years?
Yeah.
And I always answer that, like, look, I don't know where life takes me, but as cliche as it sounds, I'll be happy wherever I am, whatever I'll be doing. I have to make sure that my happiness is ultimately the most important thing in my life. And to get a little more deeper on that, it's like, I don't know. I think people neglect their happiness so much so these days that they rather live somebody else's life or rather live for someone else or something else, and they neglect their own happiness. Your happiness is something that you're responsible for. No one else will take care of. And I don't know, in my opinion, it's your ultimate goal, right? Make yourself happy first and foremost. Everything else will fall in place after that.
What a great way to end. No, that's absolutely true. I agree. Yeah.
Okay, Bill.
Get philosophical. I almost did.
We can get pretty deep. Like I got some opinions on some other things.
Well, we'll be okay.
Maybe next time.
Anything else you want to add before we wrap?
No, Bill.
That was a great moment. So thank you.
This has been good. I appreciate this. I've had a good time with you. Had a good talk with you. Let's do part 2, absolutely, because I think we can dive into some of the more esoteric topics. Maybe shy away from the traveling a little bit and talk about more some deeper topics. Right? Not that traveling isn't deep on its own, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, we will talk. Thank you, Andy.
We have
so
my
much.
people talk to your people. Perfect, Bill. Thank you.
My
again.
people is me. Thank you, Andy. Have a great day. Thank you for hanging out with me.
Thanks, man. Talk to you then. Bye.
And there's another episode of the Where Have You Been podcast in the books. Thank you so much for listening today. There was another great guest with some great stories, as always, and I hope that you will support all of the guests by checking out the show notes and going to their web pages, seeing any socials and projects that they may have going on. And please, again, I'll ask as always to like, subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It really does help to allow the podcast to grow and reach more people, and I appreciate you for doing that. Also, if you haven't done so, check out the website, whybpodcast.com, where you can find blog posts, If you'd like to be a guest, please register to be a guest on the site and check out the merch page. There's some really cool stuff if you're interested in representing the pod, along with some other cool travel items and apparel that I'm working on every day as well. Join me again next week for another great guest with more incredible stories. New episodes drop every Sunday just after midnight Eastern Time. Until then, thank you for being here and have a great day.